Welcome back to Practically Pastoring. My name is Frank. The whole gang is here. Behind Andrew, he has the beautiful Chicago skyline, and it's pretty
What's the
impressive.
temperature?
It's 0 degrees. If you look carefully enough out my window, you can see that the Chicago River is mostly frozen. And so I could walk all the way to Trump Tower if I wanted to from my hotel. I think I'm good for now. I could walk anyway on streets, but I could just walk on the river, but I'm good. I'm just going to stay here.
Nice.
I'm not wearing socks.
Hey, don't do ministry alone. This is Practically Pastoring. We have an episode for you today where we're going to be tackling two real life practical questions that pastors are facing. One is there's a member who feels like they constantly need attention. They're constantly going out of their way to almost meet daily with the pastor. So we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about, I believe, a younger preacher who has nerves about preaching for the very first time. So we're going to get into this. So Jeff, I'm going to start this question and I want to give it to you and then everyone else can come in. This is all from Reddit. What do pastors do with that one member in their congregation? So there's a lot of members of the congregation who stand out for one reason or another. But in this question, I'm wondering about the member of the church who is constantly looking for your attention. They're reaching out daily, trying to talk to you, sending religious things they found online that inspire them to share with you, always have something to that they're going through that's weighing on them and plaguing them. When it gets to the point where it's taxing mentally and emotionally to you, what do you think is the best course of action? Of course, you have to care for your flock, but it takes a lot of energy and emotional capital to engage with this specific person. Any suggestions would be greatly appreciated. Jeff, what do you do with that one taxing church member?
That's a tricky one. And I was saying this before we started recording, but I wonder how much of a dynamic of small church, large church plays into this as well. I feel like in a larger church, you might have some more checks and balances like that on the way to the pastor, maybe to get through. And I mean that in a positive way. In a small church, like in my church, there's no secretary. There's no other staff member to contact first. It's just me. And so what I have found is there's kind of two categories that I have in my head for this type of person who takes a lot of your energy. The first category is a person who legitimately has a lot of needs. And there are those people in your congregation. Maybe it's an older congregant. They live alone. They're aging in place in their home, and maybe they just need more things. They might need a ride. They might need help. Like right now, there's a bunch of snow on the ground where I am. Maybe there's a few people that need help digging out, or they need help finding someone to dig them out of the snow, whatever. So that's kind of one category where they do take a lot of energy, but there's legitimate needs. Then there's another category that I would put the bucket would be this is a person who sometimes there are people in congregations who want to be known as the person who's tight with the pastor. And I think that's probably the second category that I would put it in. They like the idea of being on the inner circle with the pastor. And so many times what I have found is this is the person that will send you things or be constantly texting you or asking you questions because they want to either find out insider information or they want to feel like they are part of the inner sanctum of the pastor's life. And I will say in this congregation that I'm currently at, I think that's happened in the past. I don't see it as much right now, but I think that, there are some telltale signs. Like one of the funny telltale signs is if you're friends with a church member on Facebook, and if they post things on Facebook and then send you screenshots of that post via text because they want you to react to it, that's a telltale sign that there's some need that they have that's not maybe being met or that's unhealthy. And so I would, first of all, recommend you read the book Boundaries. It's a great book. That's what this really issue is about. And I've said this a bunch of times in the show, but man, there is not a lot of issues that touch everything else in terms of how you relate to people more than boundaries as a pastor. I think boundaries are really, really important. So I would recommend that book. I think it's by Cloud. Is that right? You guys that know the book? Yeah. Classic book. And so I would read that book and start to implement some healthy boundaries in your life. And then The phrase that I like to use that I heard from another pastor in my denomination is that we don't give resources to dysfunction. And so one of the resources that you have at your disposal is literally your bandwidth and your energy and your creativity. And if you're constantly leaking that resource to this one person who's unhealthy and you're not helping them become more healthy, then now you're not able to serve the other 50, 60, 100, 200 people in your church that you're supposed to be also serving. So I think that boundaries and having that mindset of like, I'm here to serve this person, but not at the expense of everybody else, I think can be a helpful way to begin to look at it. And I want to say, you're going to have hard conversations. That's part of the job.
Stop me if you've heard this before, but I think that this is probably a discipleship issue.
Yeah.
I mean, one way or another, this comes down to discipleship and this person's maturity, but also not everyone's going to have the same mental or emotional maturity as everybody else. So this is a spiritual issue, but it's also, that person's own cognitive maturity showing itself sometimes. What I found is that the people most like this, what they want is they want the pastor on demand. This is I want to be able to dial in and get the attention whenever I need it or I want it. And so I've had a couple people that I've set a standing meeting with, and it was hey, listen, you can't just show up at my office. I'm writing a sermon. I've got to leave at this time. I've got this, that, or whatever going on. But I've got a half an hour. I've got 45 minutes for you every week, 2:00 on Thursday. And within about 2 or 3 weeks, it goes away because they don't want the accountability of keeping a standing meeting. They just want that on-demand service of how do I get this person's attention whenever I need it or I want it. So if you're like, hey, I have attention and bandwidth for you, but you don't get to set the terms as to when my attention and my bandwidth are available to you, they'll either find somebody else that they get that from, or it'll be okay, I get this, and I'm enough of a priority really that pastor set, put me on his schedule. And now that I know that pastor cares about me, I really don't need his attention that much anymore. And so sometimes they're just looking for care. Sometimes it's just a maturity and they're looking for someone to validate them. Chances are this person does not have anybody else in their life that they're getting this kind of attention from. And that's why they're coming to the pastor for that attention. So it's a careful tightrope walk between caring for your people and stewarding the resources of your time and your attention and your energy that God has given you.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like leaning into it the right way is important. For me, the first thing I do is you got to diagnose it, which is what you guys have been talking about. It's like with this individual, because everybody's different, I go to one of two places. I need to be tender or tough, right? Because these are different personalities. Some people require more grace. Some people require more boundaries. And what I've learned is, like, for me personally, the people who you got to be tough with, the second you create a boundary, expect a nuclear reaction, okay? Like, it's okay. Expect something to happen on Facebook or something. But here's the weird part I've also noticed about these people. They will nuclear react. They will go away, sometimes 3 weeks, sometimes a year, but they always come back. It's a real strange phenomenon about the psychology of someone like that. Maybe you guys have some insight. But the ones that you need to be tender with, that's where I do a standing meeting. That's where I'm having conversations. But the ones you make sure that you get the right one right, because this comes down to like the peacemaking versus peacekeeping thing, which is what a lot of that boundaries book's about. And creating a boundary, as you know, is really difficult if you already have a relationship and you have not yet created one earlier on. So the second you start to get this hint, you need to set it. It sounds like this person is real late in the game. So you might have to have very intentional, straightforward conversation. Hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm creating a boundary. Let them know. And if they can mentally handle that, that's okay. If not, and they blow up, just know you'll probably see them in 6 months to a year again, a lot of times.
Yeah, this is really good. Jeff, thanks for that recommendation. I literally just purchased the book with one of my Audible credits, Boundaries. Something I've struggled with quite a bit over the course of me being a lead pastor at Lakeview. I thought early on it was really important for me to connect with all of our first timers via text. So I I gave out my personal number to every first time visitor. And I did this for about 4 years.
Bro, that is wild.
Yeah. My wife said the same thing. So I still get text messages from people that visited Lakeview once or twice 4 years ago when they get into a hard situation. And
That's
it
crazy.
happened a couple days ago. I have no idea who they are. I have to go back up into the text, and it's literally like I texted them one time in 2022 and they're in like a dire situation. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I realized that, I made a mistake a few years ago, and I'm still suffering the consequences of giving out my cell number to basically everyone for years. I've since course corrected. I still like being the first contact for our first timers. I think it's important. Is
that why you've never given me your phone number? That's crazy.
I'm terrified of you, Jeffrey. So now I use Planning Center. There's tools in there, and they even have an email system where I can go back and forth with our newbies, and email just seems to work better. This is a great topic, though. This is something that I think I do think church size matters, but access is probably the big one. If you give them access, they're going to use that access. So this is a really good combo. Andrew?
Tim, I'm curious as to how, and I've had a front row seat to your role as the senior pastor at Lakeview, but you had a church that was really hurting. Your founding senior pastor left not under the best circumstances. So you went from kind of the triage unit pastor to now pastoring a pretty rapidly growing church. And so I understand why you had to make yourself very available to, there was a season where your preaching didn't matter nearly as much as your availability mattered. And that's not the case that you're in anymore. So how did you make that shift with specific people? Is there like, hey, we can't be friends anymore? Not quite like that, but I'm going to pass you off to, hey, we've got Frank here now, bug him.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that, and it was also, the staff, my wife, the elders that were like, "Hey, you need to protect yourself here. There needs to be some sort of system in place where you're not just giving out your cell phone to every person that walks in the door." But it was a shift for me because you're right. In the earlier days, I just felt like if I don't touch base with them, we don't really have a system in place where anybody will. Now that has obviously changed, but I don't know when that moment clicked. Stephanie early on was like, "Tim, you got to stop doing this. Like everyone has your number." So I should have listened to her probably 2 years before I really did.
There's, I know a couple pastors or churches. In fact, what's really funny is that Tim made fun of me for this. But
Frank, I make fun of you for a lot of things.
You having, at the last year's birthday pastoring conference, Urban D talked about how they have a second phone that he checks every Monday morning to respond to text messages, as well as for new guests to take a selfie. But he leaves that phone in his office, and he doesn't bring it home with him and things like that. So there's probably wisdom in there. Obviously, you could do a Google Voice number, but even that can kind of get mixed in with your personal phone number. So that could be confusing. But one thing I have thought would be really valuable in this specific conversation about especially for pastoral care and pastoral counseling is the idea of setting an expectation on the first time you meet for pastoral counseling to say, hey, we're going to meet for 5 meetings. Does that make sense? And if what we're trying to solve cannot be figured out in 5 meetings, then I need to either give you to a professional counselor because this is beyond my ability to care for you properly, or there's something else happening. And that way it's creating that boundary. Once you determine hey, this is not I just have a couple questions about the church and I want to know more about it. This is hey, I'm going through something very difficult and I need your care as a pastor to care for me, to set an expectation hey, we're going to meet 5 times over the next however many months or whatever. Would love to be able to try to diagnose this and figure this out before then. And if not, then go to marriage counseling, go to a professional therapist. Maybe the church can help you in that. But one thing that I've been kind of realizing is that you can get yourself caught in a trap where you become something for that person that you were never created to be, whether that was that person's best friend or person's in place spouse in many ways. Like you were not created to be that, and let's not make it like inappropriate. Like that person's father or that person's like, trusted uncle. Like you were not you were created to be their pastor, and that has boundaries and limitations to it. But like, you need to protect yourself in that. Jeff, you're going to say something?
This kind of piggybacks off of what you were saying there. And what I was going to say is, pastors, you also need to watch out that you're immature too. I mean, the reality is I like being that guy for somebody. I like being the person who's a little bit of like their trusted, I don't want to say hero, but like that's part of what draws some of us into ministry is we want to help people, but the shadow side of that is we like to be the person that can help. And so you can get into a codependency, Frank, which is kind of what you're talking about. We're like, I need you to need me to fill that need in me. And so boundaries and, things like counseling are also for you, Pastor. You're not just like eternally immune from growing. I mean, Tim, I appreciate you sharing, that you had to kind of change your method and realize, oh man, this is some at least immaturity in me, if not unhealth. And I think the kind of the grind of ministry will reveal that. It will expose what's going on in you too. When if an unhealthy person comes and tries to get a need from you and you have some unhealth in that, those two things can snowball and you can become even more unhealthy. So it may be that partly what's happening here to this person who's asking is that their unhealth is also getting exposed. And I think we should like get rid of the taboo of that. Like pastors we're not magic robots that don't need to grow. Like we're people too. And God placed us into the churches we're in so that we could be around the people in that church and grow from them as well. Yes, you should be mature in terms of the qualifications of a pastor elder. You have to be gifted in a certain way. You have to meet those things. But that doesn't mean that you are the most mature person in every possible category in your church. You're not. There should be older people in your church who have been around for a long time who you can learn from. And I would just encourage you, keep those boundaries, do those healthy things, but also look at yourself and go, do I just not like this person and I'm just being a jerk to them? That's also a possibility.
Frank, to piggyback on what you were saying, the idea of letting people know, hey, this is how many times we're going to meet. I always start with, hey, I'm not a professional counselor. And if you are coming to me looking for that, we're going to be wasting both of our times, and I can do more harm than good. So I can be your pastor. I can pray with you. I can pray for you. I can listen to what's going on. But if you are looking to have an ongoing conversation, it would be poor stewardship on my part to think that I am capable of that. And Jeff, kind of to piggyback what you're saying, pastor, a lot of people get into ministry because they like to feel needed or they want to feel needed. We can get that Superman complex and think, oh, I can fix this person. No, you can't. There's a reason that there is an entire, industry. There's multiple advanced degrees that people are getting in the idea or in mental health counseling. And most of us don't have that training. We might have a class or two on biblical counseling, and then some of that's pretty wonky as well. You have a lot of these weird, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus in pathetic counseling, but you have some counseling systems that are not necessarily what people need to fix what's going on in them. And when we have pastors, putting on their red cape saying, ha ha ha, I can do it. You're doing more harm than good. So let people know, hey, I'm happy to meet with you. I'm happy to pray with you. But here are the limitations of my expertise, of my skill set. And there's going to come to a point where I'm going to be more harmful than helpful. And so if you need anything beyond prayer and an ear for now, we need to pass you off. And that's why I think it is very important for pastors to have good relationships with reputable Christian counselors in your area that you can pass people off to.
I think as I was talking about Urban D from the last year's Practically Pastoring Conference, which he had a really great breakout on kind of assimilation and things like that. I want to invite you to this year's Practically Pastoring Conference, which is literally happening like a week from today, a week from when this episode launches, a week from today it's coming out. Delmar, can you let everyone know about the Practically Pastoring Conference?
Yes. 1 week from today, let me ask you this, Pastor. How you feeling right now? You feeling cold? You stuck in your house? How you kids? They out of school today? Driving you crazy? I don't know. But here's what I know. You're not meant to do ministry alone. You're not. You need to be around people. This is why this podcast exists. The sales pitch is not, come join 16,000 other pastors as we sit under the gaze of lasers and megachurch speakers. No, here's the pitch. We need each other. We need community. This is what this is for. You need to be here. If the Holy Spirit is nudging you, I promise you, it's not Satan telling you you need to go join other pastors and hang out and make relationships. It's God. So I want to encourage you, sign up. I already know some of the stuff that's happening. The value for this conference is probably, guys, you can correct me if I'm wrong, quadrupled what you're paying to go. The value. Yeah, and this isn't just like, oh, we're going out eating nice places, though we'll do that. It's also stuff you get back. It's stuff you get, resources you get to bring home with you. Guys, you need to sign up. If there was only one thing I did to help my ministry this year, other than listen to this podcast every week, it'd be this.
Well, speaking of conferences, by the way, if you want to go to that conference, go to practicallypastoring.com/conference. The link is in the show notes. It's everywhere, somewhere on here. Practicallypastoring.com/conference. But I believe Andrew is at a conference that's a little bit less good as our current pastors conference.
I mean,
but,
I
Andrew,
wouldn't
can you
say
talk
that
to us?
in a microphone that was recorded. But listen, I'm at a denominational conference, and so you've got people from all demographics and ages and everything. And let me just tell you, at breakfast this morning, I was very aware of the fact that there's some really bad church merch out there. There's some really, really cheese-tastic clip art looking t-shirts and sweatshirts and all kinds of stuff. Your church needs great merch, and we have a sponsor that we all actually trust. I'm wearing a church merch t-shirt right now under my hoodie. So I would encourage you all to go to promotionsguy.com/church merch. Whether you need shirts for your volunteers, for your student ministry, for your next event, first-time guest gifts, or just something that your people will actually wear and not look ridiculous in when they're at a conference somewhere. Church merch makes the process easy, and the quality is just unmatched. A lot of churches end up overpaying for merch that feels like it was a bit of an afterthought. Church merch is one of those simple wins where you can get something that is clean, well-made, on brand, without a bunch of headaches. I cannot encourage you any stronger to go to promotionsguy.com/church merch. That's promotionsguy.com/church merch and get merch for your church.
Well, let's get back into this episode. This question is a little bit less probably emotionally taxing as the first one. But Tim, I want you to be the first one to respond to this one. The question's from Reddit also. I am scheduled to preach for the first time this year, but where do I start? I am someone who is used as a musician at church and probably a youth pastor. I've spoken to one Bible study and done youth devotions. My problem is that I fear that I am not equipped yet to speak in front, knowing that I am a sinner. And I haven't even studied theology, though I have read the Bible. If you were in my position, what would you do? Do I ask not to be used at all to preach this first time? Timothy, young Padawan, tell this guy what to do.
I love this so much. This is awesome. First thing I would say is being a sinner does not disqualify you from preaching. Now, if you're living in unrepentant sin, maybe we'll have a different conversation. But since you've read your Bible, you would know that the Bible is full of very flawed messengers. God is often in the habit of using very imperfect people. He uses humble, repentant, teachable people. If sin disqualified us, I don't think any of us on this podcast would be preaching on a regular basis on Sundays. So I would say integrity, not sinlessness. And no, I wouldn't opt out. I know that was one of your questions. Did you just opt out of it? I wouldn't opt out. However, it sounds like you've got a little bit of a team around you. So I would opt into coaching if possible. Lean into those who've been doing this a long time. Preaching for the first time is not necessarily a solo sport. And that fear that you have is good. It's holy. It's righteous. It means you understand. There's kind of weight behind the task and calling of preaching. So I would say find a pastor, an elder, someone who's been doing this a while. Ask for guardrails. Ask for feedback. You can say things like, "I want to be faithful." Right? I want help. I think that sort of posture is going to go a long way with the leadership in your church. And then the next thing I would ask is, are you in a series right now, or is this a one-off and you've got, 3 months to prepare, right? Because those things are going to matter. If your church is currently going through a preaching series, arguably probably a little bit easier because you're not just having to pick out of nothing. You can follow along with what's being taught right now. For example, at Lakeview, we're going through the book of Exodus. Frank's preaching in a couple of weeks. I'm going to shoot him over the text today. He has a couple of weeks to prepare, but he's going to have a very clear understanding of, here's my text. I know I'm going to be camping out in that text. Now, if that's not the case and you need a topic, I would still start with a text. I wouldn't immediately go for a topic. I would probably choose something that maybe you are familiar with, since this is your first time. Something clear, something manageable. I'm not trying to come up with anything new here. Typically, if you're saying something that's never been said, it's probably classified as heresy. Your job is not to impress anyone, right? You're just explaining what God's already said. So do the things you know you need to do. Read the passage over and over. Ask a lot of really simple questions. What does the text say? What does the text mean? What does it look like in the original audience? What does this text demand from us today? And when you're thinking about getting into application, I wouldn't look for 3, 4, 5, 6 different application points. I'd probably keep it simple. I'd look for one that really stands out, and maybe you've got 2 or 3 supporting things you can build on from there. But really, you want to boil it down to one big idea. If you're not able to summarize the sermon in a sentence, it's a telling sign that the people listening to the sermon are probably going to have a hard time following as well if you're all over the place. So I would argue that clarity is absolutely a form of love. Also, I don't know what commentaries you're using, but if you have any, it's okay. There's sometimes there's this taboo around getting outside resources and outside help. It would be silly not to. Don't feel guilty about looking to voices that you know and trust. And even if you listen to sermons or read sermons on the text that's already been preached, that's okay. Find some good commentary, find a good basic sermon structure. These are guardrails, not crutches. They can keep you from rabbit trails or getting theologically weird, especially early on. And one thing that I still do to this day, even after quite a few years of preaching, I still rehearse the sermon out loud. I do a sermon read through every week. Sometimes it's a whisper because I do it in my home office at home, but I still try to say out loud what I want to say on stage. I would say clarity doesn't just come from writing alone. I'm a full manuscript guy. I'm a big fan of manuscripts. I understand they can be a crutch. I know guys who are notes driven, bullet point driven. I know guys who are full on, we memorize everything and don't bring up anything except the Bible. I respect those guys a ton. For me, preaching multiple services means a word count gets me right in the time frame that I know I need to be in. But it's important to know that preaching isn't about how polished the sermon is. It's ultimately faithfulness. It's about clarity. So your aim here is not how can I impress everyone? It's how can I serve the people that God has called me to serve? If people understand the text more clearly after you're done preaching, you have done your job. And for me, when I'm getting towards the tail end of my sermon, I'm going to be landing on Christ every time. I'm not going to turn the sermon into this moral advice talk. I'm going to do my best to show how this passage is going to connect to Jesus. It's going to connect to the gospel, to grace, and to transformation. The goal is always not to try harder, but look to Christ to be changed. And then I would say, week of, this is really important, just take care of yourself. Sleep, pray, don't stay up super late the night before. I was telling my wife this afternoon, Saturday night was really good because I went to bed early and I got up at a good time on Sunday. For me, it's I try to get 40 to 50 grams of protein with some coffee in me before I preach, and that's really helpful. So I'll drink a protein shake in the morning with a protein bar, and that just kind of gives me the energy that I need on Sunday morning. So I don't know what your routine is, but think of your best mornings, whatever you've done previously to have that best morning. I would say do that the night before. And after you're done preaching, invite feedback. Ask people how'd it go? What could I have done better? What landed well? And do your best to really learn from this experience, this opportunity that you're given. We're really excited for you. Hopefully you'll reach back out after you preach and we can see how things went.
I want to hit on just one of the points that you made about, you haven't studied theology enough. Then don't try to be a theologian. I think for young preachers, one of the biggest temptations that we have is we try to be someone that we like. I want to be R.C. Sproul, or I want to be Andy Stanley, depending on which vein, which camp you live in. There's someone that you've heard talk and you thought, oh, if I could do that, that's what I want to do. And so you've never studied Greek and you go up there with a Greek lexicon. Well, people see right through that. Don't try to be something you're not. Don't try to go up there and, I'm global senior pastor Timothy Miller. That won't go over well if that's not who you are. But if it's hey, I'm a volunteer on the worship team, or I'm this person, and here's what God has been doing in me, and I want to share with you. Be that. Don't try to be a polished theologian if you're not a polished theologian. And then one real practical tip beyond that is find an outline that you like. Preaching should never be paint by numbers or fill in the blanks. But if you have an outline that you work in or that you like, it's going to make things a lot easier. So one is exegetical, theological, homiletical. So what does the text actually say? So what's in the text? What does this text teach us about God? And then how can I apply this? So kind of like, big picture, bigger picture, super narrowed in focus. How can I apply this? So that's exegetical, theological, homiletical. Howard Hendricks, the now late awesome professor at Dallas Seminary, my alma mater, his was always hook, look, book, took, which is a tongue twister, but what's going to connect to it? It works. Yeah. There's a reason that it's been emulated for the past 50 plus years, but what is a way to get people's attention? What is a common problem that everybody has? What does scripture say about it? How do I apply it? Tim and I, as youth pastors, the one that we developed was the real. Here's a real story from my life. Here's a real thing. The rub. Here's the tension that we all deal with. The read. What does the text say? The ready. Here's some things that you should notice for yourself. The response. Here's the next application, single step that you follow. So whatever outline works for you. And if you haven't noticed a preacher speaking in a specific outline, I bet you if you go back and listen to some of your favorite sermons, you'll recognize that there is a common outline that preacher who you like and who you want to emulate, they follow an outline or some kind of a template for an outline that helps them to get their thoughts organized around the text. Figure out what that outline is for you and stick to it. And then the more you preach, the more you can deviate from it. But when you're first getting started, that's what you want to do. You want to follow an outline that makes sense, but also don't try to be someone that you aren't.
Yes, that's good. And I think the hook book look took, I have my own that I have. It's in, out, up, down, around. We all have our own different things. But I think hook book look took is a really good place where you could expand from. I just want to share one thing. I don't know. Some of you may have heard this story. There's this snowstorm that came up. This 15-year-old boy, he's trying to get to church. He can't get to church because he can't pursue any further, but he's able to. There's this little Methodist church on the corner. He's not even Methodist. The sucker's Baptist, but he's like, I'm going to church today. He goes into church. Maybe 15 people show up. The pastor can't even make church that day. So they tapped this one guy. He probably was a shoemaker or a tailor. The guy said that he wasn't a very rich guy. He was like, you're on deck to preach today. He's like, I'm just a congregant. He's like, I guess I'm just going to open up where we left out. He opens up to Isaiah 45. He reads the text. He mumbles through it for about 10 minutes. And finally he notices, because there's only like 10 or 15 people there, that there's this rando kid sitting in the church. And he looks to that kid and he says, you look miserable today. And the kid's like, okay. I mean, talk about you're preaching, you're telling your potential congregate looks miserable. And he goes, you know what you need to do? Young man, you need to look to Jesus Christ. You will always be miserable unless you look to Jesus Christ. That morning, that young man gave his life to Christ. It was 1850, and his name was Charles Spurgeon, from some random guy who never preached before. So you don't know how you're going to be used, man. And I think that it's an honor. And I think if you're faithful to that, even if you fumble through it, man, what a legacy to be a part of, that we get to participate in the same thing that Jesus exemplified.
I would just kind of add to what Delmar said, like all of us were asked to preach for the first time, and all of us had to trust that the person who asked us to preach believed that we could do it before we knew that we could. So I would tell you the same thing. I'm assuming you didn't just decide I'm going to just preach this Sunday. Somebody asked you to do it, which means they, at least in their thinking, think and believe that you have the ability to pull off at least one sermon. And the only sermon you got to worry about is the next one. So just prepare. I posted in our group chat just now a PDF template of another template of how to preach. Maybe we could throw that in the show notes or whatever, but it's really good. If you just want to Google Bob Thune, how to write a sermon, it's a PDF you can download. I really like his stuff. Super simple. Pretty much the same thing everybody's been saying with different words, but I would just encourage you. If you got asked to preach, it means somebody believes that you can. So go for it.
I will just say this. Tim started with this, and I thought that was good. Like, obviously, if you're a sinner, we all are sinners. Sometimes when I see people say this, like when they say in the phrase, like, I don't feel qualified because I'm a sinner, oftentimes I feel like there's one of two positions of a person that would say that. Either one, it's like they are just, they understand the depravity of their own soul, and they understand the gravity and the weight of what God's calling them to do. And so they're just like, how am I worthy, without considering that every preacher in the world, none of them are worthy, but it's only by grace that they're here. Sometimes though, when someone frames it like this, where they say I'm a sinner, it might be because they have some actual guilt of like some kind of unrepented sin in their life that they're aware of, and they don't know how to process that. So they speak in a very kind of vague way of like, I'm a sinner, and in almost a way of like hoping that someone will call them out on it. And so if that's you, if you are in this situation where you are, I'm a sinner, and you're saying this because someone has asked you to preach, but you have like some sort of addiction or sin or something going on in your life, I would actually encourage you, deal with that before you move forward. But if you are saying, hey, I'm just conscious of the reality that I am prone to fail and I'm fallible, then you have a healthy anthropology of yourself, because that's what we all should be having. Does that make sense? So I don't know who this is. If we were face to face, I could maybe ask you some more questions to kind of determine this. But yeah, like we've been saying, like being a sinner doesn't disqualify you. Being an unrepentant sinner may encourage you to not step into this path too quickly. Does that make sense? And like, yeah, like I think everyone's saying is like, get people around you that can, be able to practice your sermon, be able to speak to someone. Say, I have like, when my very first sermon at Lakeview, I had never preached at Lakeview before. I was like, I want to know if this even like matches the tone of what we're doing here. So I actually shared my manuscript with like a couple elders, a couple people in the church, just to be like, is this like within the bounds of what is normal for Lakeview, or am I like crazy? And then it worked out from there. But yeah, praying for you. I remember my very first sermon. It was in Bible college. It was a little bit safer. It was in DePronio's class in Trinity College of Florida. I had Ephesians 2, and the professor who was leading that Jeff could probably attest to this. He was one of the most intimidating professors of the entire school. He was this like super like reform guy who like kind of had his nose up to everything. He's a great guy. I'm not like actually belittling him. But that was kind of like the tone he kind of gave off of like, don't cross me, don't come with any foolishness.
Don't argue with me.
I
remember with the text.
that kind of thing. Yeah. He's actually great. I hopefully don't hear me disparage him. I just like, he was very intense and like intimidating. Yeah, I learned a ton. And I remember preaching my sermon, shaking, nervous. And afterwards, he gave me an A, and I was like, "Oh, this is all good. We all figured this out." Anyways, Andrew,
hold
last
on.
word.
My very first sermon. I got to tell this story. My very first sermon in a church.
Go for it.
Right. I had the same experience as you at school and whatever. But the first one I preached in church, I had paper notes. I went and I put them on the music stand before I went to preach. And my pastor, who's still the pastor of this church, shout out Pat Jones, he went and scrambled the pages during before I got up there. So, and I did not put page numbers. So I got up there and absolute panic, hilarious prank. He is that kind of guy, was a great pastor, is a great pastor. Maybe the single most important discipleship relationship I've ever had was with him. So I hope he hears that too. But yeah, man, what a prank.
And if you're going to use paper notes, put page numbers,
people.
Oh,
number
one strong air conditioning wind comes by. You're so messed
incredible.
up. Anyways, Andrew,
my first message ever. I was terrified. I had 18 pages of notes, and I went 12 minutes.
Yep,
it's just
yeah,
and it's fun. Like now, like man.
Just flipping really fast.
It was going to go an hour. I got to cut some of this out. It's just too much.
I was just
looked up. It was 10 minutes later.
Just been shuffled like 12.
What size font did you use?
And now I've got size 20 because I'm blind. And if I have a word count, I can look at a word count and be like, oh, okay, I'll go this many minutes based on that.
Same.
But everybody has a first sermon. The encouragement I want to give you is Acts chapter 4, when Peter and John are at the temple, and that the leadership in the temple, they look at them and they're ordinary men without training, without education, but they had been with Jesus. That's what these people spoke with authority, they spoke with power, and they couldn't figure out any reason why they would be able to do so except for the fact that they had been with Jesus. That should be the goal of every sermon, but especially your first. You don't have the authority of someone who has studied or learned, and that's okay. You don't have the skill set of someone who has done this for 10,000 hours, and that's okay. But you've been with Jesus. That's what your first sermon should be. It is a reflection of your relationship with Jesus, period. Nothing else. So don't try to emulate your favorite preacher. Don't try to convert the masses. Reflect your personal relationship with Jesus and trust that he's going to do the rest.
Well, hopefully this episode was helpful to everyone who not only asked the question, but is also listening. Again, a week from today, there's probably not going to be a new episode because we will be together at the Practically Pastoring Conference. So if you want to hear content on February 9th, come to the Practically Pastoring Conference, and you'll not only get content from the five of us, but from amazing speakers. You can go to the conference website to see who they are. The people who are coming to this conference, who are listening to this, don't even know. It's going to be amazing. We're really excited. This is the best one yet. And we say that every year, but this one's legit the best one yet. All right. With that being said, we'll see you when we see you. Talk to you later. Bye.